Why the BRRRR method sounds easier than it actually is. My name is Greg Helbeck. Welcome to this podcast today. If you're watching on YouTube, listening on audio, thank you. If you're not familiar with me, I've been buying houses now for almost 10 years. I've done well over 250 properties, probably almost 260 at this point. And the point of the show is to bring practical advice to the masses. So everything you hear on this podcast is real world information. This is not regurgitated theory out of a book. If you do get value today, if you could do me a favor and subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video, and if you're listening on audio platform, if you can share the show on social media, it would mean a lot to me. So why the BRRRR method? Sounds easier than it really is, right? So if you're not familiar with the BRRRR method, this is like the holy grail of real estate investing, which is essentially when you can buy rental properties with basically none of your own money. So how does a BRRRR method work? How does a BRRRR deal work? And when I say BRRRR, I'm talking about BRRRR. That's buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. That's the holy grail of real estate investing. I've done a bunch of them. I got a lot of friends who've done a bunch of them. The whole concept behind this strategy is you buy a property, could be any property. Let's just talk a single family house. You buy it at a deep discount at a wholesale price. So you get a house that's worth 300. Let's say you buy it for 150. All right. And then you renovate the property. That's step two. Let's say you put 50,000 bucks into the property. So you buy it for 150. You put in 50. Now you're in it for 200 with some closing costs. And we know it's worth 300. So we have 100K of equity in theory here. The third step would be you rent the property. So buy, renovate, rent. So now you rent the property to a tenant. They're paying the mortgage. Hopefully you're making a little cash flow. And then the next step after that, the next R, is you refinance. And in this case, we bought the property for 150. We put 50 grand in. Now we're all in for 200 and we said it was worth 300 because we bought it at a discount. Now in theory here, and I've done this, the bank will look at the appraisal of 300 and then they'll see that you want, let's say 200, 210,000 in terms of a refinance. And if a BRRRR goes well, the bank should pretty much give you all your money back, right? So that would be the refinance. So now they put a new loan on the property. You're in the deal for essentially nothing because the bank paid you back all the money you put into the property. And then the last step is repeat. And you just take that money you got back and you go do it again. And essentially, if you're really good at the BRRRR, you can use your capital and you can recycle it and you can build a portfolio that could be hundreds of houses or hundreds of units or whatever the case is. So the point of this video is why the BRRRR sounds easier than it actually is. So here's why the BRRRR is not as easy as doing that. The first thing is this. It's not that easy to find deals at a deep discount like that. Listen, we find them all the time in our business. We spend a ton of money, tens of thousands a month on marketing. But when you're doing a real, I call it a true BRRRR, when you have none of your own money in it, you need to literally steal the property because a lot of the gurus online don't talk about closing costs when you refinance a property. Like in New York, for example, if you're refinancing a property, the closing costs are at least $10,000. If you didn't do your numbers perfectly, you're going to have to leave some money in that deal most likely because the bank's only going to give you a certain loan to value, usually 80% max. So the first thing is that it's not that easy to get these deeply discounted properties. Now, it's funny in my business, if I want to BRRRR a property, I need to buy that property cheaper than what I would need to if I was going to flip or wholesale it usually because the closing costs are so high. I'm going to have closing costs when I buy the property. I'm going to have private money, interest costs while I'm rehabbing it, and I'm going to have a ton of closing costs when I go to refinance the property. So I need to have a huge margin there in order to truly have no money in the deal. So that's the first thing that I'll tell you about. You can't do this on deals that you don't buy at a deep discount. So if you're good at finding deals, the deepest discount deals you find, you should consider doing the BRRRR method on if you're at that point in your career. Second thing that makes the BRRRR harder than it sounds. Interest rates determine this strategy. Yes, you can do this with a 7% interest rate. It's a lot easier to do it at a 3% interest rate. So when I first started doing the BRRRR years ago, the rates were 2, 3, 4%. So I could refinance with a credit union, but my payments were like super low and all these properties, and they still do cash flow pretty well because I have a low interest rate. But once the interest rates went up, and now as the current time of this recording, interest rates are like 6.5%, 7%. So a lot of the times, the lenders you're going to use to do the BRRRR, it's not necessarily going to be like your typical bank. You're going to use like an investor lender. It's called a DSCR loan, debt service coverage ratio loan. They're going to look and they're going to make sure the property cash flows as an investment if they give you the loan. And if the rent isn't higher than the mortgage, the bank's probably not going to give you a loan because they're going to say this is not a good investment for you. So the interest rates have a big factor on a BRRRR being successful or not. Now, if you're independently wealthy and you don't need to get a DSCR loan, that is a different story, because if it's a local lender or if it's a non-investor lender, they're going to lend on the individual, not necessarily the property. So you're going to have to personally guarantee that. And if you have a good financial situation, they'll give you the loan because they know you're wealthy enough to pay it back, despite the property maybe not cash flowing. So the point is, the interest rates can determine the feasibility of doing a BRRRR deal. People don't talk about that. Yeah, it was a lot easier to do the BRRRR back in 2021 when the rates were at 3%. And now I still do BRRRRs with high interest rates. The last one I did was like a 6% interest rate. Still made sense from a cash flow standpoint, but goes back to point number one. I basically stole the property. I got the thing at a stupid deep discount. So that's the second thing they don't tell you about. And now the third thing with the BRRRR is that if you're going to do the thing that I mentioned in the beginning, which is buy it really deep, you got to really understand how to get truly discounted off-market properties, and you need to know how to do rehabs. So if you're brand new, the BRRRR is not for you most likely, because you need to get good at finding deals and you need to get good at renovating deals. And if you have no experience and you've never worked with a contractor before, that's not easy. You got to know how to manage contractors. You got to know how to put together budgets. You got to know how to vet these people. There's a lot that goes into that. Renovations are a pain in the ass, no matter what you're doing, whether you're flipping or burring properties. You got to know what you're doing. Those are the three things, in my opinion, and I'll summarize that right now. Number one, they don't talk about how hard it is to find deals at a deep discount to BRRRR. They don't talk about the interest rates, and they don't talk about the fact that you really need to understand how to manage contractors. They just say, oh yeah, get a good deal and refinance and it'll be all sunshine and rainbows. It could be, but in reality, the BRRRR is not as easy as people talk about, because the concept is simple. Yeah, you get the house really cheap, renovate it, you rent it, you refinance it, you keep recycling your money. And if you can do all those things, that is true. Yes, you can literally infinitely recycle your money. But in my opinion, the BRRRR strategy is for advanced people who have gotten more established in the business. They have some reserves, they have experience, and now they're looking to not necessarily transact real estate as much. They want to start keeping some of these properties for their own independent wealth creation. So those are the three reasons why I think the BRRRR sounds easier than it actually is. I encourage you to do the BRRRR, but I encourage you to do the BRRRR once you have some experience. Hopefully you got value from this. If you did, do me a favor. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button, share the show on social media. And last but not least, if you've heard the show before, I am an active buyer of real estate. So if you live or do deals in the Hudson Valley, San Diego, in Reno, Delaware, or in Seattle, if you're in any of those areas, I'd love to buy your next deal from you, or I'd love to JV with you if you want to wholesale it together. We have great buyers lists in all those areas. Send me an email, greg@velocityhousebuyers.com, or shoot me a DM on Instagram @grego37, and I'll see you on the next REI weekly lesson.